it's not a freak out moment, but that tendency to overreact, that becomes a real issue. This is going to bail your butt out of trouble someday. Just learn to do it well. Mr. Pat Brown, we recently did an episode on common errors in flying, whether that's a flight review or a check ride, and we were talking about steep turns. I would like to talk about an even more butt-clenching thing that people get worried about, and I'm talking about stalls.
Stalls could be an issue, but before we started last time, we talked about one of the common errors is often forgetting to like and subscribe. So I'm going to remind folks of that.
Goes without saying, and I appreciate you doing it. I get so tired if I talk too much, at my advanced age.
So do I, Jamie.
Well, stalls are one of those things that I remember being very nervous about. As a matter of fact, I was talking to a friend a while back who is an airline pilot, a successful airline pilot, long career. And I was saying, do you remember the first time you went out and did a solo stall? And they said, oh, I never did that. I know it was on the syllabus, but I just flew out and went in circles and came back later. I did it first time on my own in a 172. I was terrified, didn't do it well. But the thing that I really have come to appreciate about stalls over the years, it's a really easy to understand concept. And whether you're doing a flight review or a check ride, understanding why it's stalling, how to fix the stall, and the fact that if you're doing it at 2,500 feet, you've got a lot of time to recover. You do not have to be all wrapped up. So there's power on, there's power off, there's accelerated. But let's just talk about power on and some of the misconceptions and errors people make doing the stalls that make their life so much harder than it has to be.
Sure. All right. So the ACS on a power on stall, and I'll read it. It says, establish takeoff, departure, or cruise configuration as specified by the evaluator and maintain coordinated flight throughout the maneuver. So that means that the airplane could be configured with or without flaps. It could be configured in a climb. It could be configured really any way the evaluator said. The evaluator could just simply say, initiate a power on stall, and the applicant could just yank it back from cruise.
Mm-hmm.
So it's up to the evaluator to specify. Most instructors tend to teach it from a standpoint of we're taking off and it's a departure stall. That's kind of the way most people do it. Regardless of how you do it, the one of the biggest issues is right rudder, especially as you begin to get close to that stall. And invariably the airplane starts to tail off to the right or to the left, depending on what, depending on how much power that you've got is a big part of it. The ACS says no less than 65% power.
That's something that isn't well understood. And it's always been a thing for me. As you know, I used to own an air cam.
Right.
200 horsepower on an airplane that weighs 1,350 pounds. You're not pitching up to get a power on stall in that at 100%. It's going to take forever. You're going to gain 3,000 feet.
Yeah.
There are airplanes, and it depends what you're in. If you're in a Cessna 150 that's 60, 70 years old and it's rated at 100 horsepower, but it's really putting out 84, you can go full throttle. But there are airplanes, Cirrus, you really don't necessarily want to go full throttle and just pitch up. That's going to be a long, miserable ride until it breaks, and you're not going to enjoy that.
No, and I can tell you from firsthand experience, when it breaks at that kind of a pitch attitude, it's exciting.
Not exciting in a good way.
Not exciting in a good way. Now, all that said, Jamie, in these typical Cessna and Piper products, the 172s and Archers and, Warriors and that kind of stuff, around 2,200 RPMs is 65% power. I don't quibble too much if it's a little bit above or below that, but about 2,200 RPMs is about 65% power. There's nothing that says that they have to jam the throttle forward and pull back until you're shooting at the stars. But they've got to get enough right rudder in there. If they don't, when the airplane breaks, and I'm assuming the airplane is reasonably well rigged, but if they don't, when the stall happens and the airplane breaks, you're going to drop a wing. How much depends on how out of coordination you are, but 99.9% of the applicants that do a steep turn and drop a wing try to pick, excuse me, a power on stall and drop a wing, try to pick it up with the aileron. And that is
which just makes it
absolutely
worse.
not the right thing to do. It's difficult to spin some of these modern trainers. And by say modern trainers, I'm talking about kind of, really anything from the 60s on, probably,
Mhm.
But that said, it's not impossible.
Well, I'll tell you, you bring up the rudder factor, and that is a big deal.
Yeah, it's a
But
big
I've
deal.
noticed with the students over the years, very often as they pitch up enough that they lose the horizon over the nose, they start staring at the panel, and it's not a good productive scan. They're
Right.
just drilled in on it. Pick a cloud or something. You're drifting through the air at the same speed as the cloud. Pick that cloud and keep your nose on it and use rudder to keep yourself coordinated. It makes it much simpler because otherwise you're pitching up and slowing down and rolling off to the left because of the yaw. You're not using enough rudder. You're just creating your own problem. It's a visual maneuver. Look outside.
Yeah, it's a visual maneuver, and I totally agree with you with looking and finding a cloud. That's assuming there is one there, because in our part of the country, your part of the country, and everywhere else around too, there are days when it's severe clear outside and there's not a cloud in the sky. That
Yep.
makes that maneuver a little bit more difficult. But I have found, and I can't explain it at all, but I have found that if I look straight ahead and kind of focus on a patch of blue sky, I can pretty much keep the airplane on the heading that I want without having to look too much down at the DG. Can't explain it. I have no idea what the physics are behind it. For me, it seems to work. But a cloud, certainly, if you have that, yeah, because you're going to lose track of the horizon at a certain point.
Well, and practice makes perfect. We get better and better at it. But one of the things we have to watch on this, and I do notice this is a failing in a lot of people, they don't respect the secondary stall. All you have to do, the stall breaks the angle of attack, and you're down. You're not stalled anymore, but you don't want to lose a lot of altitude.
Right.
But I don't want to say panic, but they will very excitedly jerk back on the yoke or pull back on the stick. And now you're in a secondary stall and things are much worse. You really can just do a little bit of deep breathing as you're getting into this stall. It's
Yeah.
not that big a deal. If you just you know what's coming. You know you're going to break the angle of attack. All you got to do is just level off, add power, and come back to your altitude if you've lost 50 or 75 feet. It's not a freak out moment, but that
Right.
tendency to overreact, that becomes a real issue.
That's another common error on the recovery from a power on stall, is to push the nose forward with varying degrees of enthusiasm, and instead of just lowering the nose to slightly below the horizon, just enough to reattach the air to the wing, they push it down like this, where we're literally they're 30 40 degrees below the horizon. That's way too much. Way
Yeah.
too much. On a proper power off stall recovery in most airplanes, there's no reason to lose any altitude or much altitude when you're leveling off and resuming normal cruise. Really, you shouldn't lose any, and if you do, it's not going to be much on a
And
proper recovery from a power off stall, power on
And I'll
stall.
give you a real world example of where this is really important that people don't get it is the go round.
Yeah.
People will be coming into land and a deer will run onto the runway or an airplane will taxi out. And instead of just leveling off at 100 or 150 feet, add some power and go around, they'll jerk it up, then
Hmm.
add power.
Yeah.
And now you've gotten yourself way up there at the angle of attack. You've
Right.
added all this power, left turning tendency, and everything takes effect. And you can stall and spin it right there because
Hmm.
you overreacted to it. Just understanding, I'm not, all I have to do is level off and add power. I don't need to get all this angle of attack in and climb immediately. I'm already 150 feet in the air. I'm not going to hit anything.
Right.
Do things in an orderly manner and understand, why does this happen? I know it seems kind of nerdy, but the reality is the more you understand the physics of it, and it's not that complicated. I got it and I'm a friggin' moron. Look at all those guitars. I mean, come on. If you understand it, you're safer. And if you're safer, your passengers are safer, and you have a much better experience. So these things that people do on check rides and flight reviews that they think it's just some perfunctory thing that I'm forced to do by the FAA and the CFI, they all come down to some real reason that this is going to bail your butt out of trouble someday. Just learn to do it well.
Yeah, and I guess to kind of close this one out with regard to other common errors is that oftentimes on a private ride in particular, they'll say, "Do you want to see a full break?" The ACS very clearly says recognizes. Well, in fact, I'll read it to you. Um, Acknowledges cues of the impending stall and then recover promptly after a full stall occurs. So the ACS in the private level requires a full break. Not so in the commercial, but in the private, it certainly does.
Do you
So,
think that might be a little bit of anxiety coming out during the check ride where they're like, well, if he doesn't say he wants the full break, I could just go to the horn. But no, you're going to have to go to and the whole reason for the stall, Pat, is to demonstrate you can recover from an actual stall. It's not about stalling, it's about recovering.
well, yeah, and here's another thing too. And I know we were talking about power on stalls, but let's digress for just a second to a power off stall. Um, Here, a huge confidence builder when you're learning how to do stalls. First of all, do your clearing turns, throttle back to idle, establish best glide at a comfortable, safe altitude because you have to complete this at 1500 AGL or better.
Mhm.
So go up to 2500 or 3000 or whatever makes you comfortable AGL and throttle back to idle, put your carb heat in if you need to, whatever the book says, and then just start easing back on the yoke. It's just very gentle. And yeah, you're going to start losing some altitude, but just ease back on the yoke. Try to maintain altitude, but you don't have to yank back on the yoke in order to do that. So you're pulling back fast enough, just fast enough not to lose altitude. But at some point, you're going to run out of enough energy that you're going to start losing altitude no matter what you do. Just keep pulling back. Just keep pulling back. Keep pulling back. The nose will come up some, but if you're not aggressive with it, it won't go very much above the horizon. You may not even lose sight of the horizon depending on what airplane you're in. It's only about an 18-degree pitch up. It's not very much. So there's
Mhm.
no reason it has to be scary. And if you kind of sneak up on it like that, when you do get the bobble, and you'll feel it, you'll feel the brake, relax now, don't touch the power. Relax the back pressure, lower the nose just a little bit below the horizon, and poof, the airplane is flying again, and you've recovered from the stall. No power necessary. Do
I
that a
love
few
that.
times. Do that a few times, and I promise you, it will improve your stall recovery technique. It will improve your confidence level that you know what to do. Keep the ball in the center. This is not an aerobatic maneuver. It can be, but it doesn't have to be. So, anyway, sneak up on it and try to recover without the addition of power. So, if you
So
now,
in our synopsis, do your clearing turns, pick out a visual reference if you can, especially if you've got clouds where you've got something to key on.
yeah,
Don't be in a rush. Just set yourself up and do the stall, whether it's power on or power off. And remember, when it breaks, the stall has broken. All you have to do is prevent a descent, then add some power, level off, climb back whatever you lost. And you may be able, with practice, you'll be able to do this where you're not freaked out and you lose very little altitude and get it back quickly. Okay, Mr. DPE, on to the next thing.
and then if you're doing any of these with flaps, just make sure that you have established a positive rate before you start retracting the flaps. And if a positive rate is not possible, at least try to get zero on the VSI. In other words, where we're not descending anymore before you start retracting the flaps.
I think once again, you have saved America by expressing this in such simple terms. People do tend to have a certain amount of anxiety about stalls, and
Yes, they
they
do.
may think we're crazy that you'll get over it. You will get over it. And as you get better at it, you'll take pride in it and actually learn to enjoy doing it. It's not that big a deal, but
Not
it
that big.
is a critical thing to learn that skill, how to prevent a stall, and if you get into one, recover from it quickly and safely without getting into a secondary. That's pretty important if you're going to be a pilot.
Yep. Couldn't say it better myself.
On to the next thing, Pat Brown. Thanks so much for covering this. I had a great time today. I hope you did too.
I had a great time.
Well, let's meet and do this again. It seems to be a trend for us. And you folks back home, you come out and see us too, right here, Mad Props Arrow, on your personal device, your TV, your phone, your iPad. We do not care, but we'll see you next time.
Adios, my friend.